and the resulting remote OBD test records reported the expected data. The full list of the test conditions are listed in Section 9C1 of the Reg Concepts under the Vendor Initial Validation Testing subsection. The second phase of the certification testing is CARB device verification testing. Once a complete certification application is received, CARB staff would review the certification application package that includes the cert application form and supporting documents previously discussed in slide 17, and begin testing in a laboratory setting to verify the device performs as directed. Test conditions defined by CARB and potentially other test scenarios would be repeated to confirm the device function. This testing would verify the device successfully communicates with certain vehicles and or potentially CARB simulators, following the required standardized communication requirements. Then collects the requested data like VIN, protocol type, device name, and its identification number, while continually meeting CARB's OBD specifications and other physical device requirements. The device must be functional in standard working and vehicle environments and resistant to shock, vibration, and environmental exposure. Once CARB confirms the device passes the verification testing, the device will be authorized to proceed to the third and final phase, the vendor field testing. This is where the vendor would perform real-world testing on heavy-duty vehicle population within a 180-day time frame. The vendor is responsible for finding applicable fleets or vehicles willing to partner with them to test their vehicles in the field following the provided criteria. For example, for continuously connected remote OBD, vendor must test 470 heavy-duty vehicles with diesel engines, where 400 have J1939 protocol, 45 would have J1979, and 25 would have J1979-2 protocol, if available at that time. Vendor must ensure a complete mix of vehicles are tested, and the test results would be submitted to an electronic reporting system approved by the CARB's executive officer. Vendor must also ensure that the device is continuously in the exact same configuration as those that completed the CARB device verification testing, meeting specific data collection performance standards. That concludes my presentation, and now I'll hand it over to Nick to discuss potential concepts to explore further.
Thank you, Mitzi. Okay, so we're nearly done with the presentation, and at that point we're going to open it back up for public comment. But before we do that, we just want to highlight some additional concepts that are in the document that are in development, and tee up a few additional items that hopefully we want to discuss today. So Krista touched on this earlier, and I just want to essentially reiterate that various criteria within this program may need to evolve over time. So we're developing inspection and test methods for OBD downloads, the use of remote sensing, and visual and functional inspections. And then we're using the existing SAE J1667 protocol for opacity testing. And recent amendments to that opacity regulation essentially already require a standard of no visible smoke, but we still need to develop standards for these other test methods. So based on the decades of experience from the light duty program, we know that this program is going to evolve as we collect more information. And that could mean that we consider changing the testing and reporting frequency or adjusting pass-fail criteria to ensure that we're meeting the program outcomes. An additional concept in this document is the idea of approved testers who are capable of performing the tests required and submitting results on behalf of truck owners. And that could include truck owners who are testing their own vehicles. So in order to ensure consistency with the program regarding how those tests are conducted, approved testers would be required to take CARB-approved training courses. They'll need to register an account within our electronic reporting system, and once they've completed those certification courses, they would be able to submit the test data for the program. And the goal would be to have consistent training for every heavy-duty INM approved tester if feasible, and that may be that it's available online or in person. So I'll go ahead and pass it back over to Krista, who can bring up additional concepts.
Hi, thanks, Nick. So we're almost done. Another concept we're specifically teeing up for discussion at the end of the presentation has to do with streamlining the data submittal process, specifically for fleets with an established compliance history. SB 210 includes a provision to allow for a streamlined process, which could include using electronic submittal of OBD data instead of an annual physical testing. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation when we were talking about inspection methods, one of the options we are proposing is the continuously connected remote OBD method using telematics service providers. And this option significantly streamlines the heavy-duty IM inspection and data submission process for vehicle owners that use it. It's kind of a set it and forget it type system. I do want to give a shout out to CTA and ATA, so Chris Shimoda and Mike Tunnell, if you were out there. We did receive your letter last week. We got that after we had already finalized our program concepts. So we do want to talk to you about it. You know, we can set up other meetings after this meeting, and certainly, as you know, you're welcome to talk about your proposal when we open up the discussion as well. Moving on to the next slide. So what's next? Thanks, Alex. As I stated at the very beginning, this is the starting point. This is to be able to further our discussions with all of you and have, you know, a little bit of meat on the bones that we can start revising that and reworking that. So we do want any initial feedback and comments today, but again, not your only opportunity to provide that. We'd like to get written comments by the end of February. So if you want to provide us written comments, please do so. And there is no official format for doing that, but you should send them to either James Goldstein or myself, and our emails will be on the next slide. And we're certainly, any of the staff is available for follow-up meetings, maybe not exactly today, but anytime in the next coming weeks and coming months. I do want to let you know we are planning on having another heavy-duty I&M work group meeting in early part of 2021, probably in February, and it's going to specifically focus on enforcement efforts. As you noticed in our presentation today, we didn't talk about any violations or what types of actions would be a violation and what type of, like if you get a notice to correct or a citation. We didn't talk about that yet, so that's for another work group meeting. And then we're also going to continue after that work group meeting having more workshops and work group meetings throughout 2021. And our board hearing for this regulatory proposal is still scheduled for December 2021. And the implementation, as I mentioned at the beginning, would start in 2023 through a phase-in. And next slide, please. And you can get more information about our program. It has all the past presentations from previous work groups and workshops. You can find those on our website here. I encourage everybody to subscribe to our listserv for email updates. And then way down there in the bottom is my email address along with James Goldstein's email address. And since we're all working from home now, it's best to reach us via email rather than our office phone numbers. And then I move on to the very last slide. Okay, so in just a minute here, we're going to open it up for questions and comments and feedback. For those of you that have used the Zoom webinar platform before, you can use the raise your hand button. It's in the webinar window. And then that's our preferred method for communicating with you today because we can have more of an interactive discussion. You can also type your question into the Q&A function down at the bottom of the webinar window. And we see there's a few questions down there already. And if there's anybody that joined us via the conference call phone number, press #2 to raise your hand. And with that, we are done with the formal part of our discussion. So I think we will probably go to questions for people that are raising their hands, if there are any hands raised.
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Alex, and I'll be monitoring the questions as the hands are raised. So before we begin, I'd like to apologize if I mispronounce your name. I'll do my best, but go ahead and please raise your hand by clicking the button, the hand button at the bottom of the screen, and then I will allow everybody to speak in the order that the hands are raised. So once I say your name and allow you to speak, you should receive a notification on your computer asking you to unmute yourself. And that's how you know that you are next to speak. So at that time, please go ahead and unmute yourself and then begin speaking. So let's begin. So I see Matt Schrapp, you have your hand raised. I'm going to give you the opportunity to speak right now. Please unmute your mic and you can ask your question.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Krista, and everyone for putting this on here. Question that you guys didn't specifically touch on, but kind of encompasses the larger responsibility of these standards relative to specifically to what you guys are referring to as rented vehicles. I guess I have a couple questions when we talk about who the owner is for purposes of enforcement. And I get it, we're doing an enforcement discussion later, but I think that maybe some thought going into this prior to that enforcement workshop might be helpful. And that's specifically differentiating between a finance lease and a operating lease, because how you guys have lumped it all together, which it's basically saying that a lease is a lease is a lease, but it's a rental, it's a rental, it's a rental. And technically they're two different things. A lease implies a start and an end date. A rental is kind of at the whims and fancies of the renter. A finance lease is different in the sense that you have a registered owner as well as a lien holder, and the registered owners would be both the finance company and then the subsequent lessee or the operator. And the finance lease, again, is like any type of finance company, from Crossroads to Bank of America, BMO, PEB, anyone that's a traditional depository or non-depository institution that offers equipment leasing is different from like a Ryder or a VTRL or a PAC lease or something like that that's offering operating leases. So there might be some value in trying to parse out those a little bit more. Yes, it is just one piece of paper that would have to be signed within the lease agreement paperwork, and maybe that's your guys' motivation. But I think lumping them all together might just cause some confusion later, because rented doesn't necessarily mean leased. That would just be my comment for here, and I'll let you guys go ahead and address that if you don't mind. Thank you again.
Matt, this is Krista. I can respond to that question. Let me turn my video on so you're not just staring at my little dog. I remember all that from my days in the truck loan program. And so those are very good points. And I think, yeah, we should have some further conversations on that so we can flesh that out more within the concepts. But I appreciate you raising that to us.
Okay, thank you very much, Kristen. It's a very cute dog, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
And Matt, can I ask you a quick question? This is Jason. So based on what I heard, the understanding here is when you talk about the finance loan, you're talking about the bank, basically. An owner buys a vehicle and gets it financed, or the bank helps pay for it, and then they have a loan that they're paying out. So is your recommendation that we basically differentiate, saying if it's like a finance holder, like a bank, obviously they're not the responsible owner, and then saying just making that clear in the regulation? And then
generally, yes. I mean, but a loan versus a lease are two different things, because a finance loan, like what we'd call like a retail loan, would be if I just went to the bank, they said, here's your money, congratulations, I'm now the registered owner. There is a lien holder, but I'm a registered owner. It's really for tax purposes, right? So a finance lease would be now, okay, I am the registered owner along with this lessor, which could be Crossroads or, Wells Fargo. And now they also hold lien on that vehicle, but now I have the ability to expense the cost of that lease on my taxes differently than if it was a retail loan where I'm the single owner and I'm depreciating that equipment. So yes, maybe a differentiation between the finance lease and then a operating lease from that respect, I think would be helpful. And I know there's probably some other lessors on the line here too. I'm sure that they could chime in and give some perspective, but I mean, there's a lot of different nuances between operating leases and rentals. They're similar, but a finance lease is different, and it would traditionally be issued by a finance type company or a depository institution that does leases.
Appreciate you bringing that up, Matt. We will definitely look into that and probably reach out to you for a more thorough discussion as well.
Great. Thank you again.
Okay, next we have another hand raised from a phone number ending in 3435. I'm going to give you the opportunity to speak right now. Please ask your question.
This is Rick Walter with HEM Data. My question is related to slide 23 where it says pass-fail criteria for each test method. Sounds like it's still under development, but I was wondering if you could comment at this time, like for example, do all the DM5 monitors have to be passed? Were you able to hear me?
Yeah, I got you, Rick. So the question is, so when a test is submitted, basically looking at DM5, basically are there fault codes or not, and how do we determine the pass fail based on looking at that?
Well, it's not just the fault codes. I mean, DM5 tells which monitors have been successfully passed, and this might be more detailed for this particular workshop, but I was just wondering if either anybody on the line had an idea of what you're thinking about the pass-fail criteria for OBD.
So, hi Rick, this is Ehsan from CARP. The pass-fail criteria for the OBD as we are envisioning would basically, at its initial stage, would rely on mail status, and of course the confirmed and permanent fault code. So we're not looking into the readiness status of every supported monitor on the OBD system to see if each monitor is checked as ready. It's basically based upon the existence of confirmed and permanent fault codes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have a question from Michael. I'm going to give you the opportunity to speak right now. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, this is Michael St. Dennis from Corp. I actually have 5 questions. The first one is in the regulation, it says that there has to be the ability to do testing at the cap and the max fee, which is $30. So I read this regulation, and if I'm a vehicle owner, I'm wondering, what in there tells me how you're going to cause that to happen?
So there will be a certification cost, right? There's a section there of getting the cert of compliance. We don't have a specific cost in there yet because we're still working out the potential cost for this program. For example, right now we actually have a request for information out to potential I&M vendors to start really understanding these costs more. But I mean, the plan is to definitely meet the requirements of the statute, if that's what you're talking about, how there needs to be a test and the compliance certificate that under the cert fee max. So for example, we do have a test that we're envisioning, a test option that we're envisioning right now. I think I don't remember what section it is in there. It's somewhere in section 3. But it allows testing to be done at locations that are approved by the executive officer. And we're envisioning that those locations would actually be offering free testing devices that vehicles can go up and either free or very low cost, where, for example, at a truck stop, where you can go into the convenience store, grab a a dongle go out and test your vehicle for very cheap or free to meet that requirement within the statute.
So how would you cause that to be very inexpensive, I guess is the question.
Because there's little to no cost to actually do that test, to go in and actually get that device and bring it out to your car and plug it in, data submits to the database, and you move on.
But if the private people who do this don't want to charge the cert fee minus the $30, how do you cause that to happen? I guess that's the question.
So
is it a condition to be certified as a tester that you will say that you'll do it for less than that amount?
No, there are multiple options, right? So for example, there's a telematics option, there's a INM approved tester option, and there's another option there where you can go into these locations and do the test yourself, right? I mean, there are going to be tests, yes, that probably cost more than that one provision within the statute. I mean, we need to have at least one method that's readily available, and we're looking to establish sites that vehicles can go to and have a very cheap to free test that they can do if that's what they choose. And that's the vision right now of meeting that.
Okay. Have you guys determined what the cost will be to certify a continuous or non-continuous device?
So we do not envision at this point having a certification fee for the device vendors to come and get certified. That's something we're looking at, but right now we do not have a specific fee. Like I know with BAR, for example, the DAD devices, I think cert fee is a one-time cost of, I want to say $10,000.
Yep.
Right now, we are not envisioning having that large of cost, that's for sure. And we're still trying to determine, if we do need a cert cost or not. We're not at that step yet.
Okay, and for cert in the third phase, you said that we have to find 1,000 or 500 vehicles to do beta in. That's a large number. That is a big expense to find enough people that have enough fleets with enough vehicles to do that cert. Is there a reason that the number's so high? I mean, we do beta testing with, 10 or 20 vehicles. We know whether or not it's going to work. We don't need thousands to do that.
So that's something that we are definitely open to discuss more. Definitely, I would be very interested in hearing your thoughts of where a reasonable number should be set. I mean, one thing we do want to make sure is that we have a good subset of vehicles to ensure that these devices work on all the different type of vehicle manufacturers, the different protocols out there. But it's definitely, I would not say that is set in stone right now. And I do want to have more thorough conversations with you and other vendors on, where we can set that threshold. That's reasonable.
Okay. For transit vehicles, they actually are required to do a pre-post trip inspection every day, and school buses before they go out. And they can have, some of them have scan tools in them, and part of the process is that it collects data from them. But it is not, it will be a device and a tablet that do that. And I don't know if that would fit into the continuously connected or non-continuously connected, because it's more like non-continuous. Bus operators turn their vehicle power off at night. So you'll trigger a power event every single day because they don't leave the batteries on overnight to make sure they don't drain because they've got all this other equipment on the vehicles. Mm-hmm. Could there be a third category that the data could come up as part of the state mandated pre-inspection that's done on those vehicles with a device that's connected? There are a lot of people that would be able to comply easily. Those devices won't, because it's done through a tablet, they won't be able to tell you if the power went on or off. I don't even know if most ELDs record that without having to make major changes to them. And in the same vein, since it's done through a tablet, you've mentioned of, lights going on and off, and those messages could be communicated through a tablet and not through the device. Okay. So is there a third category, if I can outline what that was and how it would work, that you would consider?
Yeah, I think so. I kind of see what you're talking about as almost a hybrid between a non-continuous device and a continuous device. I mean, I think as long as it meets the requirements of our, what we need in terms of data, I mean, I think we don't have an issue of either putting a subcategory in, let's say, non-continuous or continuous if there are alternative methods.
Okay, and then my last question is, for vehicles that come from out of state that aren't part of a fleet, they're not going to know that California has this law. For instance, I keep using motorhomes, but if a motorhome comes in from out of state, they visit the Grand Canyon, they visit something in California, and then they leave.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really have a way to enforce that unless you pull them over and make them go through your screening process. They won't know that they have to comply. Is this a category of vehicles that you guys could exempt under 44152A2, which is you guys can exempt things that just, it says economically, there's no advice that the cost benefit of compliance is fitting?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. That's something as we move forward, we will look at more. Right now, what we've been envisioning is I think we have a reduced compliance requirements for those vehicles. But yes, you're right. That is going to be a challenge, especially for, just the families that come in with their RV. And we don't want, families to get stuck with, oh my God, I have no idea, why am I getting this ticket? We did put a provision in, so right now where there can be basically you can obtain a pass. So, hey, I'm coming in just for, call it vacation. I think we call it a 3-day pass, or that can be used to come through where you don't have to meet the compliance requirements of the program. But I think we can definitely explore other alternatives to that, and we're definitely open to hearing other suggestions on what will make it more feasible for families coming in who, do not care about, heavy duty requirements coming into California.
Yeah, because if it's not communicated, I mean, I don't know how you would communicate that to somebody in Nebraska that's going to drive in for a week and have no idea that there's a method of compliance. And if the industry finds out that you have to go through some paperwork process to get a permit to come into California for a short period of time, it will drastically curtail the economics of people coming into California, because it's like travel to Hawaii now is very restricted, and you have to jump through a bunch of hoops, and their travel's down to 1/10 of what it was. And I could see if you do that to people coming into vacation in California, you might have that kind of an impact on tourism.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think this is definitely a part that I know we have mentioned that we have an enforcement work group coming up, and I think this is definitely something that we want to explore, because we want, there's a balance. We want to make sure that the individuals that you're talking about are not unduly burdened, but also that we don't create a loophole that, fleets that should be within this program and find a way to skirt through. So there's a balance there, and I think definitely having conversations about this and figured out what works best for both sides will be really important.
Okay, thank you much, Jason. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, we don't have any more hands raised, so we will move on to the Q&A session. So there are a few questions we have, so I'll pass it over to CARB staff, and I'd like to remind everybody to please read the question out loud for everybody to hear before answering.
Okay, are folks able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, hi, this is Kim Horowigowski with CARB, and thanks for everyone who's attending today and for putting up with us learning how to do this Zoom during quarantine time. And I really appreciate all the great questions and comments. I'll take the first two here, which are from Ed Ward. Ed Ward wrote, industry is already seeing troubles with CARB and DMV communications regarding registration renewals. When this occurs, will CARB take an active role in correcting, and will complaints be directly submitted to CARB for corrections? And I think probably what Mr. Ward is referring to is there have been some glitches recently regarding DMV registration in conjunction with compliance with the truck and bus rule. We're aware of that, and I know the CARB staff, relevant CARB staff, are working to get that straightened out as expeditiously as possible. We believe that issue has been caused by some training, lack of proper training for some at some DMV locations. So we're definitely in this program attempting to learn from any glitches that are occurring in other programs like that. And that's one of the reasons that we're working really closely up front here with other agencies that are involved in this, like DMV, to get all the systems set up and streamlined and make sure that we have as few glitches as possible. So thanks for that question. And then Ed Ward also asked, will CARB maintain a record of failed or inaccurate findings and the hours the truck industry loses to their use of CARB certified trucks access? I can't commit that that we would be able to track every hour that that a affected truck owner might have to spend complying with this program, but we're definitely very, very sensitive to the issue of making sure this program can be implemented as cost effectively and as conveniently as possible. And we're very aware of the issue that downtime is extremely important for trucking companies and can really make the difference between being profitable or not. So we're endeavoring to design a program that that really doesn't cause additional downtime, and if anything, perhaps helps companies avoid downtime because it encourages really careful maintenance practices. And so we definitely will be looking at that issue as we sort out the details of how we set up this program and try to set up a program that is as easy for truckers to comply with as possible. And one big method there that we're very excited about is the telematics option, the continuously connected telematics option, where we think really if folks are maintaining their fleets and they use this continuously connected option, it should be pretty seamless, set it and forget it. And so we don't think it'll add a lot of downtime or cost. Okay, so that's that one. Is there another, well, I'm going to mute myself and see if another CARB person is ready to read another question.
Sure, I will take the next two. So we have a question here from Pete Calkins. Will OE continuously connected devices have to be certified via the testing described? And the answer to that is yes, we are envisioning that the OE devices would have to be certified as well through the same process. And then there is another question from John McNamara. Is the compliance schedule for, Is the compliance schedule for natural gas vehicles different than diesel trucks? The question for that is no. The only caveat is for natural gas vehicles, OBD doesn't start till I believe the 2018 model year. So whereas the OBD starts for diesel vehicles in 2013. So the only little difference there is going to be that some of the 2013 through 2017 model year vehicles would be subject to the non-OBD requirements, not the OBD requirements. But other than that, the requirements are identical. So, thank you.
Hi, this is Cody Howard with the Enforcement Division at CARB. I am going to take the next question, which is testing intervals. There was a question about keeping the testing intervals to once a year, similar to the periodic smoke inspection program. We are increasing the testing interval both for 2013 and newer model year engines trucks and 2012 and older trucks because of the mileage that they go in a year, different than light duty vehicles. And we see the need to have those vehicles tested so that we can get them in. We want to make sure that that they are properly maintained, and once a year is not enough to make sure that vehicles do need to are properly maintained. So thank you for that question.
Okay, and I can take the next one, which is from Michael Lewis. And Michael Lewis asks, what happened to the pilot project called for in SB 210? And thanks for that question. So as we actually had a work group devoted solely, well, not solely, but devoted primarily to discussion of our pilot projects just last month. And there are a number of pilot efforts ongoing that we're using to learn more about this and get this program set up as well as we can. And so if what I will do is put in the chat feature here a link to the slides from that last month's work group presentation. So pilot efforts include, we're looking at enforcement methods, we're looking at gathering how best to gather OBD data, we're looking at various remote sensing devices, and all that, and all those individual pilot efforts are feeding the design of this program. So I will put a link to the slides which give a very detailed discussion of each of the efforts. And if anyone wants to know more than what we shared at last month's work group presentation, feel free to reach out to us individually and we can get you up to date with the latest latest findings. We were very actually fortunate. One of the big pilot efforts that we're doing is comparing the three main methods of remote sensing that we have available, and we were able to fortunately get that field work done before this latest spike in COVID and before we had the stay-at-home order. So we did get some really good data just several weeks ago, and we'll be analyzing that and taking advantage of that as we flesh out the program design. So thank you.
Okay, I will take, there's actually two questions, very similar questions here. So on the funding for the program, so I'll go ahead and take that. From Jack Donahue, we have a question, how will this be funded? So how will this program be funded? So there is a certification fee that will be charged for this program, very similar to a light duty program, smog check program is a certification fee that users pay, and that fee helps fund the costs of the program. And then Jennifer McMullen asks a question, is the compliance fee per vehicle, so $30 per vehicle? So yes, the compliance fee is per vehicle. We mentioned a little bit earlier that we're still in the process of fine-tuning the costs of the program, so we don't have a specific cost right now. But as we move forward and firmly establish, how the program is exactly going to work and what the requirements and costs are, we'll be able to nail that cost down. At the reg concepts right now, we have, I think, the compliance fee, we just have a XXX through it where we basically insert a cost in the regulation. And just a note of that cost would go up. It can go up based on the CPI per year to allow for, to account for inflation. So thank you.
Thanks, Jason. At this time, we have a hand raised from Mike Tunnel, so we're going to switch over to that. I am going to allow you to speak. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate this workshop, and seems like it's a good format. So in the regulation, it talks about freight contractors and having to verify that the vehicle has a compliance certificate. And in many cases, linking the freight to the actual vehicle is, not really known. So I'm just wondering what type of, it's not really possible to know exactly which vehicle your freight is going on. So how is somebody able to do this, or what type of mechanisms available to them to ensure compliance as a freight contractor?
Hi, Mike. This is Cody. Appreciate your question. I think, Heather, if you're on, I think this this would be something that you could answer.
Hi, Mike. This is Heather Quiros in the Enforcement Division. Thank you for your question. I think generally speaking, ensuring that the freight contractors or those that are contracting with vehicles ensure that those vehicles are compliant, as well as the facilities where they're going, is a way that we can sort of level the playing field. I think being able to identify learning more about the industry and how these contracts work, I think would be helpful. So I think, Mike, further, conversations, if you have additional information on how these work, or when you're saying it's linking the freight to the actual vehicle is not really known, I think getting some additional information from you on that would be helpful for us as we explore this option. We're using a similar option in other regulations. And so I think some follow-up conversations with you would be good. But generally speaking, the reason for it is really to try to ensure that the vehicles that are being hired and dispatched are compliant.
Right. Okay. I'll add it to my list to
Okay.
talk to you later.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Next, we have a question from William Barrett. I'm going to give you the opportunity to speak right now. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, thank you very much. This is Will Barrett at the American Lung Association, and wanted to just briefly express our appreciation for the conversation today and the preparation of the materials. We do look forward to digging in more closely and having some follow-up conversations with the staff. I just really did want to say, this program is critically important to achieving clean air goals and protecting public health. And we do remain concerned about the implementation schedule and would like to kind of continue discussing with you ways that we could potentially move up the implementation schedule statewide earlier than 2024. So that's the main thing I wanted to note is, we think that this program is critically important. We think it's going to deliver life-saving clean air benefits. We know that it's going to play an important role in achieving attainment of clean air standards, especially in our most polluted regions. There was a discussion of this yesterday at the South Coast. So I think that overall, we'll look forward to digging in and providing further comment, but do want to see, opportunities for accelerating the full implementation of the program to deliver those public health benefits. So thank you again, and look forward to following up.
Thank you. At this time, we are going to jump back to the question and answer. We have a few questions. I'll hand it over to CARF staff at this time for that.
So we have a question on, have we looked at the differences between buses, i.e. touring, motor coach, and how they're used, maintenance, et cetera, and heavy duty trucks and their ownership? And I think this goes back as well to what Michael St. Dennis had said previously, vehicles coming in from out of state, people who are doing, just driving in motorhomes and whatnot. So this is certainly something we're looking at and looking to seek input from on how people use these vehicles and their differences, and how we can, balance the regulations and making sure that people are complying, but also giving people the opportunity to come into the state. So that's certainly something we can continue to work on and chat with you about. And then there was a question on, would a 3-day pass apply for out-of-state charter buses? So anyone can apply for a 3-day pass. Right now, a 3-day pass for our truck and bus regulation, you can get it once a year. And so that is also something we're looking on, like how often you could get this 3-day pass and how it would apply. So yeah, and thank you for those questions.
I can go ahead and grab, I got a couple in the queue here. See a question from Jennifer McMillan. Can the vendor's beta test also count towards the vehicle owner's compliance test? So we are not envisioning that because the beta, I assume what you're talking about, this is for the certification process to get the device certified. So because we're testing the verification, we don't know yet if the devices are actually working as designed. We are not envisioning that those tests would be used for compliance purposes for the owner, because it will be difficult for us to understand, is there a vehicle issue? Is there a device issue? So the vision is that compliance testing would be done from certified devices only. And I think I saw a follow-up question from you in here. You also have a question, will the compliance determination only be based on this regulation? And then the question is, yes, the compliance certificate will be based on the requirements of this chapter. So I think in the reg concepts, we say you get a compliance certificate if you're compliant with if you're basically compliant or in good standing with the document that we have there. So all the requirements within that document would be how you get the compliance certificate, but we're not envisioning to move the compliance certificate for other programs as well. Okay. And we apologize here as we're going through the questions here to answer, but give us a couple seconds to formalize the answer here. Cody, if you have one, feel free to fire away.
Sure. There was a question under the current PSIP regulation, opacity tests are required annually. The heavy-duty INM concept document for non-OBD will now be required every 6 months. So we understand, and so is this cost effective to fleet owners? We understand, and we're trying to balance, again, this is a balance between making sure that vehicles are maintained and getting fixed so that we can meet our air pollution goals, as well as balancing what the fleet owners need. And so we feel like requiring twice a year testing is a balance between those two things, and that's why we're requiring 2 times a year.
Okay, I have this is Fred Garza, CARB. I have a question from Dan Potter. Is there a broad recognition that many vehicles have battery switches with which they turn off battery power to the vehicle regularly? And second, what is the purpose of that triggering a reporting event for a continuously connected remote OBD device? So to answer the first question, I don't believe we have much data concerning heavy-duty vehicles being shut off, battery disconnected, but we have been made aware that yes, this is I guess a common practice. As far as what is the purpose of triggering this battery disconnect event for a reporting event, I'm assuming that's what your question is. In general, disconnecting power is not a reporting event for transmitting or recording data to CARB, but we would potentially use that to detect any fraudulent activity. Maybe using that as a detection to say that the owner operator is removing the device, so he wouldn't be detected for a certain reason. And the other triggering reporting events we've mentioned earlier in previous presentations. I don't know off the top of my head, but in general, they would be like a mill-on event, a change in drive cycle, a change in some other important events in terms of the OBD data communication.
Hi, this is Chris Rule from CARB, and I'd like to answer the question that was asked by Brian Hennessy. What is the plan to protect against manipulation of data by third-party devices, false reporting methods by data manipulation in general? Yeah, we've been discussing this a lot at CARB, and you know, a lot of this goes into the device certification that's already been brought up. We'll be putting in some measures in that process to make sure that those devices are not vulnerable to fraud. And our main, you know, approach is just to, you know, in selecting what data that we're requiring to be submitted with the OBD. So, you know, it's not just the mill on-off, but there's a question about readiness. We'll be collecting that data. We'll be collecting stored test results. We'll be collecting CVN, Cal ID, and there's, you know, as I'm sure many people are aware, there's a lot of data that is available via OBD, and our plan for detecting fraud is to get, you know, a large part of it and to, you know, dig through it and compare the different OBD data submissions that we get from the different trucks, and, you know, look for anomalies, look for other patterns that we see in a large data set that we collect. And so, like I said, it'll mostly be, you know, the specific things like readiness, like stored test results, CVN, Cal ID, these types of data, which is available via OBD scans. So thank you. That's the answer for the question from Brian Hennessy.
Alrighty, thanks, Chris. And I will go ahead. We have a question here from Pete Calkins. Since OECC devices will have to be certified, will the certification testing specs and expectations for such devices be allowed to be targeted for one brand of vehicle? So that's a good question. I see your point here, Pete. For example, let's say, you know, Cummins has a device in their vehicle, right? Is there a reason that they have to also be certified to work on, let's say, PACCARs? I think the way we have it in our reg concepts right now is we were saying that the device can be certified to one specific protocol like 1939 or 1979. But based on your comment here, I understand what you're thinking here, and I think we would be open to that and further discussions on that. But I think please correct me if I'm wrong, if the scenario I mentioned here was not what you're envisioning, where basically an OEM would just want to do their own vehicles and not have to worry about being compliant with other vehicles. So thank you. And then actually there is one other question from Allison Kelly, which is probably some of Chris's answer just before mine applies to this. So she asks, how will you overlook and confirm telematics readings in the fleets? So Chris did talk a little bit about how we're going to be looking at, you know, understanding whether the data coming in is valid and makes sense for the vehicle. So that will be one avenue to that. We also have the certification process where we are basically going to make sure prior to letting these companies actually submit data for owners in this program that they meet the requirements of the rule. And we also have a few other checks and balances out there. For example, we highlighted a little bit here about RSD systems out there. So there is a way, for example, that we may be checking as vehicles go through. Let's say there's a vehicle that has really high emissions and we come back and we're looking, wow, this vehicle just submitted OBD data and it says everything's fine. Something's a little fishy here. Let's do a little more investigation. So those could trigger some of the things to maybe check the vendor, try to understand maybe if something's going on. Allison, if you have other suggestions on ways that would be good to, you know, oversee this process, I think we're definitely open to that. And I'd love to talk to you further. And maybe a little more clarification. I'm assuming this question is kind of more based on how are you basically protecting the fleet owner from if something goes wrong with the telematics provider. But if I'm not understanding the question correctly, please let us know. Thank you.
So we had a follow-up question from Michael St. Dennis on the 90-day testing interval, and that some vehicles over 14,000 pounds, such as local delivery vehicles, do not have high mileage. And will CARB provide modeling of the cost benefit of testing, which shows the difference between testing every 90 days versus annual testing? And yes, as part of as we develop this regulation, we will you know, put together an ISOR and other documents that will have that information, and we will certainly be providing that. Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Cody.
Hey, Alex, one quick sec. Just before we get to the hands up, there is one thing I wanted to touch on from Pete Calkins had just a follow-up additional context for his question. I just want to let the audience know this before we move on. So he's just said additional context, the OE devices are likely hardwired and built with different monitoring requirements focused on their specific brands. So I guess, Pete, the one thing I would say is we would still expect that, if these devices would need to meet the submission requirements of our program. So if they meet the requirements and they're for their specific vehicles, I think that should be fine. But if there's more you want to talk about, please, we can follow up. So thanks. Sorry for interrupting, Alex. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jason. So we have a few hands raised. I'm going to unmute your mic. Bridget McLeavy is next to speak. I'm going to allow you to talk. Please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. Bridget, this is your opportunity to speak. Please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Hi, Bridget. This is Krista. We can't hear you, but I did see a question in the written Q&A, and you were asking about if the heavy-duty I&M program would replace existing SMOG programs. The intent is that when the heavy-duty I&M program is operational, it would replace the periodic smoke inspection program. And we potentially would be sunsetting that regulation. And then also for the current heavy duty vehicle inspection roadside program. So yes, it would replace our current heavy duty vehicle inspection programs, if that's what you were asking. If you had an additional question that wasn't in the Q&A, if you can unmute your mic, you can ask that.
Okay, I think we'll move on. Bridget, I'm going to lower your hand. So if you do have an additional question, please re-raise your hand and we'll get back to you. The next question we have is from Daryl. I'm going to allow you to speak and please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, this is Daryl. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm late to the meeting, so hopefully I'm not duplicating anybody else. So I had several questions. So one is our meters have been able to download, this is opacity meters, been able to download to the database for many years. So my question is, what's the format, or who's the executive officer we can contact to get the format for electronic submission? Because we're ready to do that. We just never had that contact to do that. So I was wondering about the executive officer to approve the file format for opacity test submissions on the non-OBD.
Yeah, sorry, Daryl, are you talking about right now, like you would like to submit OBD information in lieu of doing PSIP?
Yeah, also on your proposal on like page 16, I think a non-OBD, you have it where data submission option could be electronic submission in your proposal.
So when we have the program set up, there will be a database where you can submit your information to after, the program starts. And to comply, you would upload your data to that database when that is going. For now, if you would like to submit OBD data for the PSIP program, we have a protocol for that, and I can certainly provide you with that information outside of this meeting. But
okay. And then the next question is, you said you're going to sunset the previous one. Do you have a timeline for the sunsetting of the previous requirements?
Right. So when this regulation starts, the full regulation will start January 1, 2024, and that will sunset the PSIP program right when this program starts. So. And
then the final question would be, do you envision or see requiring that OBD data include opacity measurements, where they would have a live, or the trucker would maybe stop and do a live opacity test, and have it included in the OBD data? Is that a future thing that you might see?
Right now, we have no plans for OBD-equipped vehicles to also have to provide opacity tests.
I was envisioning maybe as an OBD built into the truck sensors and have it as a live data stream, or as embedded into the manufacturer's systems with opacity measurements?
So certainly there are sensors on there that take live readings of the PM and NOx, and as part of the heavy duty, we have the real data that comes in, and that starts, I believe, in 2024, but people can correct me if I'm wrong. And that data can provide that sort of information as well.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, Daryl.
Thank you. So we have another question from Michael St. Dennis. I'm going to allow you to speak. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Michael St. Dennis from RevoCorp. It's not really a question. Fred Garza was talking about the battery disconnect and why, how that affects things and why you collect data. And there's actually an easier, more creative solution to this. If you require that the device keep track of when it has and hasn't been connected to power, that's basically going to require that every ELD out there be re-engineered. They don't, as far as I know, have the capability to do that because it's never really been a requirement. And it's not quite as easy as it seems. However, with continuously monitored devices, you do get odometer every time they report. And so if you look at the odometer, and although on a bus it is turned off every night and you'd get a record every day, and in that case the disconnection of power is really not going to tell you anything, and you'd have to sort through that data to figure out somebody who is disconnecting it because their check engine light came on. If you just simply look at the difference in odometer between measurements, you can tell that you know, who cares if the power went off or not? There was no mileage accumulated, and so it's not an impact. And in fact, if you remove that requirement to report when the power goes off, you'll probably get less junk data to your database, and it will make it easier for you to see what it is that you actually are looking for by looking at the odometer differences. That's all I have.
Appreciate that, Mike.
Hi, this is Ed. May I just make a comment about what Mike just said. So checking for the odometer, so the reason we are basically checking for the power, the consistency of power flow, as Fred pointed out, you know, could be, you know, to be able to detect possibly removing the device from the vehicle. So would we still be able to do that, you know, by only looking for odometer changes? Because, for example, as an operator, you could unplug the device knowing that your power is not checked, and reprogram or do whatever you want to do, clear code and stuff, and plug it back in without you know, leaving any trace. If you know that odometer is the only thing that actually you are checked for.
Well, if you didn't accumulate any mileage, that wouldn't matter, right? You're not on road operating, which is the thing you're worried about. I'm just saying, if you send a record every time the power disconnects and you use that to suspect fraud, you're literally going to get millions of those with just a few where people did that for fraud, and you won't be able to see them. Whereas if you're saying, you know, I need to see continuous records, meaning once a day or every 100 miles, I need to see a record come up, that's a much better metric to tell you that they're not cheating than just an indication that the power was disconnected. Every time they're serviced, they may disconnect it to plug in a scan tool. There's just a lot of other reasons, and the power isn't the best thing to determine whether or not there's fraud going on, I don't think. I think there's just easier ways to do it. I do, you know, I worked on the remote OBD document for light duty, and there was a discussion about what does continuous really mean. There are other metrics for continuous. You guys don't really define how often a record has to come up in continuous specifically. But, you know, I would say that every time, and it would be an easier thing to do, is every time the vehicle operates, and it's more than 100 miles or more than 500 miles since the last time we saw a record, send one up. The system would know that. And then power on, power off, anything else that happened is, it's doesn't matter at that point because they've not been out driving, generating emissions, which is the thing you're worried about.
Thank you, Michael. That was fair. Thanks.
Yeah. No, I just trying to be creative.
Sure. Thanks. I appreciate that. It really helps because we're still, trying to basically come up with the best way in terms of practical considerations and ease of use to tackle this issue. Thank you.
Yeah, on the light duty side, we really struggled with that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Michael. So the next question that we have is from Janet Whittet. So I'm going to allow you to speak right now. Please unmute your mic and ask your question. Janet, we cannot hear you, so please unmute your mic and ask your question.
I'm so sorry, I accidentally raised my hand. Let me lower it. Sorry.
No worries. Okay, so at this time we do have a few questions in the Q&A, so I will transfer back to that. So CARB staff, please go ahead and answer those questions.
Thanks, Alex. I can jump in here. So we have a follow-up question from Michael Lewis. Asking more about pilot programs. He asks, shouldn't a pilot program test how all the pieces work together on a small segment of the market, including collecting the full cost of compliance, devices, and time involved? And that's a good question. I can explain why we're not making one way we considered doing a pilot program when we first started thinking about this was, oh, well, maybe we could set up I&M just in a certain region of the state and run the whole thing there for a little while, like in one county or one city or something, and then roll it out more broadly. But as you think through how the whole system needs to work and the complexity of setting up the database, and also just the fact that this is being built involving numerous state agencies that have a sort of legislatively required official IT process that we need to go through. There's really no way to set up the whole program and test it just in a little portion of the state. Like imagine trying to hold DMV registrations just for trucks in one particular city or region or something. So that's why we realized early on that as we work up the official parts of the pilot program, we need to look at each element individually. And so we're piloting OBD data collection tools, we're piloting OBD data processing, we're piloting various remote sensing devices, we're piloting ALPR cameras, license plate recognition cameras, and we're piloting different ways of doing enforcement. But that's that's sort of for the official pilots that will be written up as required by SB 210. Those are the pilots that you can expect to see in that report that's required by SB 210. However, we're very cognizant that this is a difficult and complex program to set up, and that's part of the reason we're very carefully going through the project approval lifecycle process and making sure we think through every possibility and proceed very methodically through this. And so we're definitely not planning to just sort of design the whole thing and then cross our fingers and hit a button and then suddenly have it be in place. As we set it up, we'll be gradually phasing it in, and part of the database development process will be testing out different parts of the system as they go live. So even though you won't see like a regional test of the whole program written up and as part of the SB 210 pilots, we will be carefully testing that so that it'll be phased out smoothly and successfully. So Alex, back to you.
Alex, should I take a couple of these written comments right now, or do we have hands?
We don't have any hands, so please go ahead with the Q.
All right, let me take a couple questions here. So I'll take a question from David Rengler, and I apologize if I butchered that last name. Will government fleets and public agencies pay the same as private entities. So yeah, the current vision right now is that there wouldn't be a differentiation in this program based on private and government fleets. And then I did want to also take a follow-up question from Allison Kelly. Her question previously was about how to we're going to oversee the telematics data submission. And her follow-up clarification is, to clarify my question, are you planning to use RSD for continuous monitoring of the fleet for the confirmation of on-road data with telematics? So, and Cody, please follow up here if I've missed anything, but basically the RSD will be there, and when we do flag a high emitter, and we'll define that as we move forward with the program, but they would be required to basically submit to us confirmation follow-up testing, whether it's an OBD vehicle through the OBD test, or if it's a non-OBD vehicle through the opacity and visual inspection test. But yes, the RSD will be set out there as an additional check to find vehicles that potentially may be emitting high emissions and to make sure that they get into compliance.
Thanks, Jason. That covers it. I can move on to another question as well. We have one from Jim Zabin. He's asking, some data from DMV will be uploaded, as well as will truckers' data be uploaded, and the data from DMV that's uploaded, it includes the chassis model year, not the engine model year, which is correct. So the reason we're linking those is so that we can pull in all the data into the database that you've already submitted in various formats, so that it is easier for the fleet owner to not have to enter in all the information again, but you will be required to verify that that information is there. And so that is why we have those. But yes, like truckers' information will be uploaded, but there will be the need to verify. And then another question we had was from Jennifer McMullen on will visual inspections be able to determine PM and NOx exceedances in compliance? And no, a visual inspection is not, will not be used to determine PM and NOx exceedances. It's just used to ensure that the components that are required are there, that you look for them, that you look for the emissions control components, things are working as properly. So that's what those are, why those are included in the regulation. Okay, and I think that answers those two questions. And it looks like at this point, we do not have any further questions on the, Alex, do we have any raised hands?
No, we don't have any hands raised. So maybe we can give a minute or so. If anybody has any additional questions, feel free to raise your hand or type in your question in the Q&A box.
Okay, it looks like we do have a follow-up question from Jennifer McMullen. So as a follow-up, will OBD be required for all vehicles? No, for OBD equipped vehicles, yes, but that's basically, for simplistic purposes, think 2013 model year engine and newer for diesels. But yeah, for older vehicles, they don't have OBD, so we would be doing the opacity and visual inspection test. Thank you. Okay, so a question from David Rinschler again. How will notification be given to all owners of vehicles over 14,000 gross vehicle weight rating that don't know this rule is coming? So that's a good question, David. So definitely we are going to be doing a lot of outreach internally as CARB to make sure we get the message out there. We're also coordinating with DMV. For example, when the renewal notices come out for vehicles that would be subject to this program, they will have notice on their DMV registration that compliance with this program is needed. So we're looking to really coordinate with other state agencies to get the word out, do internal outreach to stakeholders as well, and go through that. And I think one of the easiest, I guess, talking points I've kind of mentioned to people is it's almost like if you're not subject to BAR's light duty smog check program, you basically more than not you'd be subject to this program. Granted, there's a few minor exemptions, but that's kind of the talking point I've used. But yeah, we're going to be very active in trying to get the word out. So I appreciate that comment.
There is a question on what are the requirements for the opacity test? Are there certain standards? So it's similar to our PSIP program now, right? So we use the SAE J1667 smoke opacity test. And for instance, I'm not going to go through them all, but vehicles equipped with DPFs, diesel particulate filters, would have to meet a 5% opacity standard. And then there's a number of other ones based on the model year of the vehicle and what it's equipped with. But that's, yeah, if you just go to our current PSIP regulation, you can get that information. There was a question about, can we start recording these? I think we can start doing that. So we didn't do it this time, but in the future.
Actually, Cody, generally, I was going to take that one. Yeah, actually, generally, for workshops and work groups, our practice has been not to record them because we want people to feel able to speak freely, and it can make people nervous if they feel like they're being recorded. However, if that's something that folks are interested in, we could check with our legal to be sure, to see if that's allowed. I'm also interested, for those of you that follow multiple CARB rulemakings, if you're aware of any other groups that are already recording them. This is kind of, obviously this format is new because of COVID. So this is a little different for us than being in physically in a boardroom. So I'd be interested in feedback from stakeholders on if they find that useful and if they've seen any other CARB groups doing that. So far, we've made a conscious effort not to record things to enable free communication.
Okay, we have a follow-up comment from David Rensler again. Can CARB notify California League of Cities, fleet organizations, etc.? Public agencies are going to have to get buy-in from executive management to increase budgets for this rule. So yeah, David, we can definitely reach out to them, and we will do that. Thank you for the feedback. And David also says local politicians will need to be aware to help understand the request for increased maintenance budgets. Okay, appreciate the feedback, David.
So it looks like we don't have any more hands raised or any questions. I think we can give another minute or so. If anybody has any questions, this is going to be your time to ask.
There are several questions on, will the presentation be made available? Will the PowerPoint be available? And yes, it is available on our website. If you go and look at the announcement, it'll have a link to our presentation.
Also, if you, thank you, Alex, he put up the slide that has our heavy duty INM website on it. And so the presentation was posted last night, so you can get it from there.
And then I do have a request actually from one of our internal CARB outreach coordinators and managers. So one thing we would like to ask all of you, if do you guys have additional recommendations on how to better outreach, or what fields, what communities or people we should be outreaching to that we are potentially missing right now? But I think really coordinating with you guys who are in the fields can really help us understand if we have any potential holes in our current outreach and how to improve those. So I know it may be difficult. You may not be able to answer right now, but I think moving forward, we would be really appreciative of any recommendations you all may have on how to do that better. So thank you. I see a comment here from Pete Culkins. Can exemptions or exceptions be discussed for OECC devices that may already address concerns targeted by the certification rules, but may do so via a different method? So Pete, let's set up a meeting to discuss. I'm not 100% clear on what exactly what exceptions you're looking for here, but we're definitely very open to having meetings to try to make sure, that this program not only meets the needs of, owners, vendors, and CARB. We're definitely want to make sure this is a streamlined program. So if there's something as we come to discussions, and there's probably stuff that we can learn from you to understand as you're talking about, where maybe there are devices out there that, maybe don't need as much certification. But yeah, we can have those conversations. So please feel free to reach out to either Krista or James, and we can coordinate a meeting to have a more thorough discussion on that. So thank you.
Hi, I'm going to take the question from David Rentschler, and we appreciate your comment that the National Association of Fleet Administrators can help reach public and private fleets. So my question back to you, David, is can we work with you to connect with the right people at the National Association of Fleet Administrators? And are you part of that group as well? Maybe Alex can unmute your microphone to be able to respond to that.
David, if you'd like to comment, please raise your hand and I will unmute you. Great. All right, David, please unmute your mic and you're able to speak.
Hello, my name is David Rentschler. I'm the Fleet Division Manager for the City of Fairfield here in California, as well as I sit on the board of directors for the Municipal Equipment Maintenance Association, known as MEMA, fleet managers here in California. Also the American Public Works Association, the National Association of Fleet Administrators as well, and I belong to several Clean Cities coalitions. So I've contacted already the local chairman of the chapter nearest me for the NAFA, as well as MEMA NorCal and MEMA SoCal, and spread the word about this. I'm not sure if they're on watching or not, but one of the big things that we've talked about in the past as a small group of chairmen is that unless CARB is going to the local politicians or city managers or county administrators and letting them know, all they're hearing from us is we want more money for our maintenance budget, and they're not understanding. So if CARB could reach out to the county administrators and the city managers and let them know, it carries more weight. Thank you.
Okay. We appreciate that comment. Thank you. And we will definitely follow up on that. We may be talking to you more about that as well, but we appreciate the comment. Thank you.
So this is Kim with CARB. I just wanted to make sure people realize that we sent the reg concepts out ahead of this work group, but we recognize that it's a long document with lots of little parts to think through. So we didn't expect that everyone would have necessarily digested it all by today. However, we definitely encourage any of you who have time to go through it, read it carefully, and let us know if there's any parts that seem unclear or if there's places where you think we got something wrong. We definitely want to hear that feedback, and you can just reach out to Krista or James, and if we start to see enough interest, we could definitely schedule another work group to talk further about these concepts. As you read through the concepts, you'll see, you'll be aware that there's certain parts where we sort of put placeholders for parts that we're still developing. So we'll definitely plan to have subsequent drafts of this coming out as the months move forward. But definitely for other programs, like for example, for CARB's recent heavy-duty omnibus regulation, it was extremely helpful to have the affected stakeholders give us feedback regarding clarity and regarding how we set it up. And we definitely made a lot of changes to the proposal based on that feedback. So I just really encourage those of you who are here today not to view this as something that's locked in and not changeable. We definitely want to hear from you. And I think Krista may have mentioned this up front, but we really appreciated the letter that we got, I think, from CTA and ATA with some suggestions regarding exemptions or ways to set up the program that did come in after we'd already drafted this up. So you don't see that here, but we're definitely thinking about that and definitely appreciate that those suggestions and feedback.
Thanks, Kim. And we actually do have a question that came into the queue from Eileen Hartsock. So the question, is there an exception for on-road heavy-duty vehicles to have on-board diagnostic devices? Will a new device need to be implemented to check for emissions? What is the benefit of using the OBD over doing the biannual check? Okay, so let me take these one at a time. And Eileen, I apologize if I am not giving you the exact answer that you're trying to ask here, but feel free to follow up if I misanswer your question. But so the first one, is there an exception for on-road heavy-duty vehicles to have onboard diagnostic devices? Okay, so all road heavy duty vehicles 2013 newer have OBD systems that they basically have, they have upon certification, and our internal CARB staff certify those and verify that they're allowed to be sold. So the question is there an exception for on-road vehicles to have diagnostic devices? I'm assuming what you're asking here is there an exemption for vehicles to not actually submit the data to CARB? So the actual devices we've been talking about, right, would be devices that can plug in and grab the data from the vehicle itself. So we're offering a few different options there. For example, there could be the telematics option. There could be a non-connected device that's certified that anyone can take to plug in to the vehicle. But in terms of, are there exemptions on actually doing the OBD tests and submitting the data? It's very limited. We talked about a few of the exemptions. For example, vehicles that come in very infrequently, for example, could do something like a 3-day pass on an annual increment, or for example, there may be less testing frequency for vehicles that operate at really, really low mileages. But beyond those, there aren't full out exemptions for actually participating in the program. Other than, gasoline vehicles would not be in our program. Even heavy duty gasoline vehicles would not be in our program because they're subject to BAR's light duty program. The other question, second question you had, will a new device need to be implemented to check for emissions? So a device would need to be plugged in, and basically you plug it in. For example, a device may be plugged into the OBD port and it can grab the data and then remotely submit the data to CARB. There are other options. For example, we talked a little bit about, for example, some of the OEMs right now have some of their internal systems that are actually, could be even installed behind the dashboard where you may not even see them, where they may be doing the data checking and sending to CARB. So there's multiple options. So it's not necessarily you would have to purchase a new device. For example, even there's telematics providers out there, for example, that, that fleets already work with right now that can certify to our program that they have, their device does do this testing. So it's very likely that people will be able to potentially use the devices they already currently have on their vehicles if that vendor comes and certifies with us. And then the third question, what is the benefit to using the OBD over doing the biannual check? So if I'm interpreting this question correctly, is the question, what's the benefit of using OBD versus, for example, the current capacity checks that are currently going on in the heavy duty sector? So if that's the question, the benefit is that OBD monitors the full emissions components platform of the whole vehicle, whereas opacity testing really only looks at tailpipe PM emissions. So the OBD test is a much more comprehensive test of all emission components rather than the really specific test that the opacity meters test for. And so I will stop there, but Eileen, please feel free to reach out to us further if I did not fully answer the question you're hoping for. So thank you.
Hi, so we also had a question from Darren Clark. If one has a 2013 or newer truck, do they have to opt in on the telematics OBD method of testing, or can one opt to just do the 4 opacities a year? So if you're equipped with a 2013 or if you have a 2013 model year engine or newer truck, we're requiring OBD testing, which could be telematics or dongles or whatnot. If you have a 2012 model year engine or older truck, then we're requiring opacity tests. So you don't you're automatically opt in if you're based on your model year of your engine. James Goldstein, would you like to answer the question on costs from Christina Ross?
Sure. Hi, Christina. This is James Goldstein. In the light duty smog check program, they do have a process by which you can get a repair cost waiver if the repairs to pass smog check are above a certain limit. I'm not sure what the limit is now. Someone else may know. It's gradually gone up over the years, and that would give you a one-time exemption. We have not envisioned that for this program, but it's certainly worth talking about. As you all know, or many of you know, we did a pilot with the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District to determine whether or not there would be a need in this program for a repair assistance type of program where if you are a single owner operator or meet some other sort of lower income standard, that you could potentially be eligible for repair assistance on emissions related repairs. We do expect the final version of that report out shortly, and we'll look at that and determine whether or not that should be a component of this program. Part of that, of course, would require that we have some sort of funding stream to support that. In the light duty repair assistance program, the smog abatement fee is used to pay for the light duty repair assistance program under light duty smog check. The smog abatement fee is the fee we pay in California for those who own newer vehicles that are not required to get a smog check. So in lieu of getting a smog check, when you pay your DMV registration renewal each year, you'll see a line item called smog abatement fee, and that supports the Bureau of Automotive Repair smog vehicle retirement program and low-income repair assistance program. I hope that answered the question. Let me know, Christina, if you need more on that.
Hi, this is Krista. I'm going to go ahead and answer a question from Grant Stickney. And the question is, why do state and local vehicles have less reporting intervals? And Grant, they don't have fewer reporting intervals. It may have been confusing on the slides. What's different about them is kind of like how their compliance year is defined, but it's still an annual basis, but they would be subject to the same data submission frequencies and testing as annually registered vehicles. So if they're OBD vehicles, it would be 4 times per year. If they're pre-OBD vehicle, it would be twice per year. Obviously, there would be some exceptions in there of some of the state or local vehicles were just partially only used for partial portion of the year and those types of things. But for the most part, it's going to be the same data submission frequencies and testing as all other vehicles.
Okay, this is Fred Garza. I'd like to take a question from Allison Torres. I've heard that OBD equipment sometimes issues erroneous codes since they are complicated systems. These codes may not be emission related. How is this being addressed for OBD vehicles? So for the first part of the question, yes, they are complicated. However, we are focusing only on the OBD related fault codes that have been designed to meet the OBD requirements and have been sent to CARB for review to review their OBD systems. Any fault code that's not OBD related, for instance, manufacturer specific fault codes, for instance, like let's say the seat warmer is most likely is not OBD relevant, so those would not be, if they were seen in the OBD data, they would not be used to fail a vehicle. So if there are cases where erroneous emissions related fault codes are popping up on vehicles, so basically we would be doing the same process we currently are. We would identify the issue, we would get with the OEMs, either the engine manufacturers to verify if this is really an issue with their vehicles, and if so, there will have to be some either field fixes to address those issues, or if there's cases where it may not be possible to fix, maybe there'll be cases where we'll just ignore specific fault codes. So if you have any additional questions, feel free to post a follow-up, and I'll send it back. Thank you.
And an additional question from Christina Ross. Are the quarterly submission dates fixed dates, and what happens if the user doesn't submit within the 45-day window? Does the next submission date window just get smaller, or does it get pushed out based on the last submission date? So if you do not submit within the 45-day window, then you will lose your compliance certificate and will be issued a citation for operating without a certificate of compliance in California. And the window, it doesn't get pushed out. So for instance, if you are required to submit on 3/1, your next one would still be 6/1. So it just makes the window smaller. Thank you for that question.
So actually at this time we do have a hand raised from Dan Kiefer. So I'm going to allow you to speak, and please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Great, thank you. Dan Kiefer from PACCAR. Kim, thank you for pointing out the extensive document that was posted to the website. I did have an opportunity to read through it and have a couple of questions looking for clarification. One of them was under the vendor field testing area, table 4 and table 5. I was struggling to differentiate the purpose for the two tables. They seem to be the same. I couldn't find a reference to the tables by table number in the text.
Dan, thank you so much. It's nice to hear your voice, Dan. Can you repeat that again? I think we're scrambling to find exactly where that is and maybe see if we could share a screenshot so people can understand what you're talking about. So could you say the details of exactly where you're looking? Page what?
Sure, it's page 46 and 47, tables 4 and 5 under the vendor field testing. It outlines the number of vehicles and the protocols that are supposed to be used. The titles to the tables are the same. Actually, table 4 was I now see is the non-continuously connected. So within table 5, the continuously connected device, it has number of vehicles that need to be tested over the 6-month period. And it lists multiple protocols. I'm presuming that since a device is typically just one protocol, that only that protocol would have to be tested.
Yeah, Dan, if for example, there's, we talked about, if there's a continuously connected device that only wants to do, let's say, the 1939 protocol, or only wants to be a specific, I don't know, PACCAR OEM device, right? You would fit the, you would have to do the protocol that you're trying to certify for. So we can update, we'll have to be more clear, I think, on that as we move forward. And we'll have to put in those kind of nuances.
Yeah, and going along that line, footnote 1 in that table, it's the same for the table above, but in particular on this one, the test vehicles must be from at least 3 different engine manufacturers.
Right.
If an OEM doesn't have 3 different engine manufacturers, then obviously they could not comply with it as stated there.
Yeah, we'll have to, I think when we were writing this, the thinking was that these devices would just be working for it's basically all the vehicles or all the manufacturers within the protocol. But as we talked here, I think I do get the point where for manufacturers, right? I mean, they have their own devices, if they don't want to be, there's no reason for a PACCAR to have to, match with a Cummins or a Volvo engine. So we can work on that. You guys.
Okay, that's great. In one other place earlier, and I don't have it specifically in front of me, there was a reference to the fact that the devices need to work on both J1939 and J1979. And I think the intent was need to work for one or the other, but the implication in the regulatory language is that it has to work for both.
Yeah. The way we wrote it here in the initial draft was comprehensive, but we can, we'll have to be more specific there. So yeah.
Okay.
I agree with what you're saying.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Alex, were there any more people that have raised their hands?
1 second, please. No, that looks like it's it for the hand raising.
Oh, I think we may have one more question in the written Q&A.
Yeah. So we have a question from Rob Cram. Staff may have already addressed this, but could there be a consideration with regards to older trucks pre-2013 that may be used for limited mileage, trucks that may be utilizing the low mileage provision in truckers or yard type trucks that may not get high mileage, perhaps a provision to PSET test one time a year as is currently required? And Rob, actually, we do have a specific provision in there for use that would be once a year. And we've been envisioning this. It wouldn't be specific just for non-OBD vehicles. For example, even if there's an OBD vehicle, equipped vehicle that's low mileage, especially if we can envision this program out in the next 10 years, right? Some of these OBD equipped vehicles will become these older vehicles. So we are considering provisions like that. So appreciate your comment.
Okay. Does anybody else raising their hands right now or would like to raise their hand or would like to submit a written comment or question? We'll give a couple minutes for people to think about it. But again, we're going to reiterate, this is not your only opportunity to talk to us. Alex has the slide up that has the email for myself and for James, and we are open to talk with anybody that would like to speak with us. Also, I'll put out the request again. If you have some written comments you would like to provide, please do that. We'd like to get those by the end of February. You don't have to provide written comments. It just it kind of memorializes it, and it makes it easy for staff to really go back and ask more questions about them. Make it clear, if you provide these written comments now, this is not the same thing as providing written comments when we release our staff report in the formal comment period open. So these are just informal written comments. We'll see now if there's any more questions or if anybody else raised their hand.
We do have a hand raised from Lynn Howe. I am going to unmute your mic. I'm going to allow you to speak. Please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Sorry, that was inadvertent.
No worries. Thank you.
We do have one written question that just came up from Velasquez. Question is, what is considered a low mileage vehicle? So right now the consideration is a vehicle that operates less than 1,000 miles a year in California. Thank you for that.
Okay, while people are thinking, I actually have a question for the participants today. So one of the, as we're trying to design this program, one of the issues that we've been thinking about is this compliance certificate, which is of course going to be a very key enforcement tool. And there's a number of different ways that we may be able to set this up. We're thinking about this internally. We're also working with our partners at CHP, who will be hopefully helping us enforce this program. But we're interested in feedback from those of you who may be covered by the program regarding some options that we may have. So one way we could do a compliance certificate is a paper certificate that's like physically printed by either the I&M implementation contractor or the state and then mailed to each person. That'd be kind of the most cumbersome and kind of old-fashioned way of doing it. Another option we might have is having in our database, if someone's compliant, then they can go in and print their own compliance certificate from that database and then store that in their vehicle. And then the third sort of, I guess, least paper intensive way would be to just have the compliance certificate be something virtual, where if you're in compliance, there's a compliance certificate available in the database, and you could check it electronically to see if you have it. An enforcement person could potentially check if you have it, but it would be electronic. We're still working out with legal and with CHP whether all these options are really doable. legally and pragmatically by the state, but I'm interested as we work through that in feedback from those of you who are here today. Did folks have any thoughts about which of those would be their preference? Cool. And people are putting in the chat, electronic, app on your cell phone for compliance certificate, electronic only. So yeah, it would be great if people want to put in the chat here what their thoughts are, if they want to tell us later what their thoughts are on that, but that is something that we're thinking about the best way to set it up.
Thank you, Kim. We do have a hand raised from Taylor Collison. I am going to give you the opportunity to speak right now, so please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Thanks. It's actually Chris Shimoda with the California Trucking Association. Might have been a registration snafu there. So, Kim, to your question, I do know that this has come up quite a few times that fleet managers, especially those with dozens or more drivers in different areas, different geographic regions, do not want to have to distribute paper. Just a logistical nightmare to do that. And so while paper maybe can be an option, I would definitely steer you guys towards having an electronic form if possible. Another issue that's been raised is with the requirement for a compliance certificate being presented at the time of vehicle registration. Is there any consideration by staff that, at least for California in-state registered vehicles, that there is sort of a, if you want to say assumption that if you have a valid California registration, therefore you have a valid compliance certificate. If there would be a requirement to present the compliance certificate in addition to the registration for at least the California registered vehicles. And we'll try to seek more feedback, but I do know, generally speaking, fleet managers with the larger fleets do not want to distribute paper. So please do look at that electronic option. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, well, we're waiting to see if anybody has any remaining questions or comments. I think Cody or Rochelle, did you want to talk about what's going on or what's planned for the enforcement work group meeting?
Sure. Thank you, Krista. So we're planning to have an enforcement work group meeting at the beginning of February. And during that time, we will go over the specifics on what we're thinking of on violations, referee testing, the remote sensing devices and high emitters, roadside inspections, and then due process and admin hearings. So look for that workshop to come out, or the workshop notice to come out, and please participate if you're interested in that. Thank you, Krista.
Okay. Does anybody have any more questions they'd like to submit either in writing or by raising your hand? And I'll say again, you can email us afterwards as well.
I did have one follow-up for Chris. So with the DMV registration, because we're requiring quarterly PSIP, or sorry, not PSIP, excuse me. Because we're requiring quarterly compliance checks for that certificate, you could be registered but not actually compliant, and so that's why we would need to check for that. So, and if you wanted to respond, you could raise your hand, I believe, and Alex can.
So at this time, we do have one hand raised from Dan Kiefer. Dan, I'm going to give you the opportunity to speak now, so please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Great, thank you. One of the, as I read the full document, one of the ways to fail a report is to have a permanent fault code on in the engine. And the way of clearing permanent fault codes can be rather long, a long time period in a commercial vehicle. And I didn't know whether ARB had looked at all of the ways that that happens and the timing in for diagnostics on commercial vehicles, and whether or not that there are some diagnostics that maybe need to be excluded from that requirement, because some may not be able to run inside of a 45-day period based on the duty cycle of a particular vehicle.
Yeah, Dan, this is Fred Garza-Carb. Yeah, I think for those cases, I think we're just going to have to be cognizant of that would probably exist, and I think we're just going to have to take case by case and maybe even just exclude those as part of the pass-fail criteria. So I think that's basically the best answer I can give you at the moment.
Okay. Fred, you're going to be more familiar with it than I am, but is the 60 warm-up cycles a part of the permanent fault code clearing also?
No, it's not. This is for heavy duty exclusively?
Correct.
No.
Okay. I know that's when we can finally get rid of some codes, is only after the 60 warm-up cycles. So I didn't know whether that applied to permanent fault codes or something else.
No, the permanent fault code criteria should be, at least for the light duty, I can speak for light duty. Light duty goes off with the mill light, so heavy duty should also follow suit.
Yeah. I think that the permanent fault code erasure doesn't, on heavy duty, is at least requiring the 3 cycles through the diagnostic, 3 pass decisions. And I was concerned that maybe the 60 warm-up cycles was a part of that as well.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dan. We do have one more hand raised from Michael St. Dennis, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to speak now. Please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Yeah, this is the question about permanent fault codes. Dan, I think you're right. I think it is 60 cycles. It is not cleared when the mill goes off. The whole point of permanent diagnostic trouble codes is that they stay around. And this is a major problem in light duty testing, is that people's cars fail, then they get a repair, then they go back to get retested, then they're not ready. And they say, when do I go back? How do I know when I'm ready? And there's no indication to them in the vehicle when the car meets the readiness criteria. One of the advantages to the continuous program is that you kind of don't have to worry about that because things are continuously reported. But like you said, if you have a strange duty cycle where you're not doing all these starts, the permanent diagnostic codes are just to tell you that the problem was there and that it's been fixed, basically, so that it doesn't hurt anything. The mill won't come back on. The only thing is you won't be ready. And what I heard earlier was you guys aren't really going to look at readiness criteria right now. This leads back to the question about monitoring power going off. Again, like buses turn their power off every night. Fire trucks do. All those kinds of people disconnect their power when they're not being used. And that's going to clear readiness every single day. And so if you're waiting to see a record that has full readiness compliance on a transit bus or school bus, you're never going to see it. It's never going to come through. And that will be something you guys need to think about how to deal with. 45 days to get things to get ready and send a record. If you figure it takes, 2 weeks to get fixed, that's 30 days. And if you only use the vehicle a few times a week, you may not get there. And I don't know how if you have readiness criteria for clearing the NOV, I don't know how you'll do that. That is a complicated question. Good one. No, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, this is Tom Montez with OBD. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Yeah, just about the permanent fault codes. The fastest way to clear a permanent fault code is to use the scan tool to send a clear code. You can't shut off the mill. It doesn't clear the permanent fault code, but it shuts off the mill. But then when you're on that path, it would only require one trip to execute.
You're cutting out a little bit. I'm not sure why. If you can get closer to your mic. Are you still there?
Okay, I got a headset. That works better.
Great, thank you.
Oh yeah, the fastest way to clear the permanent fault code is to send a clear codes command with the scan tool.
No, it doesn't clear it.
Well, hang on, there's more to the story. So you send a permanent clear codes with a scan tool, which shuts off the mill. And then once the mill is off, you run the diagnostic, and it only has to run once in order to erase the permanent fault code. Whereas if you don't follow that method, you would have to do the normal 3-trip mill eraser to remove the permanent fault code. So that would drastically reduce the time to clear that code. Does that make sense? Do you follow?
It's still going to take the same amount of time for the diagnostic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you just have to run it once.
Yeah, you need to run all of them to capture all of the readiness data, though. You want all the monitors, depending upon the system, all of them to run, or you can't consider the vehicle ready and have checked everything. You can, if someone wants to pay to have a technician do that, that can take time and be expensive, that's all.
Oh, well, Isan, I don't know if you could respond to that, but I thought, Isan, you mentioned that the readiness criteria would not be part of the check.
Yeah, the readiness data will be collected, but for the initial pass phase decision, it's not going to be, one of the passing criteria to have all the monitors ready.
Yeah, that solves your problem with people who disconnect power but won't if people are doing it intentionally, although I'm not sure what you can do about that because of the way these vehicles, some of them are used. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Okay, so this is Kim again, and I just had another couple questions for the participants today. So one thing that we've been thinking about is it's wonderful that there's so many folks here joining us today, but it's obviously not convenient for everybody that owns a truck or drives a truck for a living to come during the middle of the workday to spend hours with state regulators discussing this program. So we're looking for the best way to try to reach all the people who will be affected, in particular owner operators. And so we're aware of some trade groups that represent them. And we've thought of the idea of having, some evening meetings potentially, which is relatively easy to do now that we're all, on Zoom. But if folks have other suggestions for specific groups we could reach out to, or venues for reaching these folks, that would be great. Well, we're also, there's a lot of existing sort of outreach infrastructure that CARB's developed as part of rolling out the truck and bus rule, like our one-stop trucking events and that kind of stuff. So we'll plan to use that as well. But if people have other ideas, like we definitely want to make sure that people are aware this is coming and have the ability to give us their ideas, and in particular, people that just maybe own one truck and aren't really active in a trade group, want to make sure that we inform them and hear their ideas. So if folks have ideas now or later want to suggest stuff, that would be great. And then a second topic I wanted to bring up is, and this kind of came up a little bit earlier when people were asking about downtime. And, thinking about additional time to do, special reporting to CARB, or additional time to do additional repairs. The way that we think would be sort of least disruptive for this program to work is if affected vehicle owners do take the continuously connected remote OBD option, the sort of, stick a dongle on your truck, set it and forget it, and hopefully you could use the telematics service you're already using. And then you just repair your truck and you don't even have to really think about this. In looking for, we brought this up, as we've been workshopping this and work grouping this, we brought this idea up before, and we did receive concern back that, I don't really want information to be transmitted to the state without the ability for me to review it first. And I want to see what's going to CARB before it gets sent. And so I'm looking for ideas on how we could incentivize people to choose that method, or how we could make it, I guess, more attractive or less worrisome to have that method. How can we encourage people to choose that method to comply? Because I do think it would lower costs of the program and make it easier. So are there provisions in the reg we could put in that would make that that option more attractive? So as people are looking through the reg concepts, if you could be thinking about that and give us some ideas on that, that would be really appreciated.
We do have a hand raised from Matt Strapp, so I'm going to allow you to speak. Please unmute your mic and you can ask your question.
Hi guys, thanks again. Appreciate this, and I'm sure everyone's looking forward to getting this wrapped up. There's several different webinars going on at the same time here today. Just on your point there, Kim, this continuously connected concept, we understand, I think, from the industry's perspective of where you're coming from with this, but, I don't understand what you guys mean by, give us an idea within the constructs of the reg and how we can encourage people to participate in it. But because, more or less it would need to be incentivized somehow, which would seem to be in your guys' purview. On the other hand, you're discouraging folks from using existing telematics that would be basically paperless, that would allow folks to be reviewing their information before it got sent to the ARB, just like you would be doing if you were on a non-continuously connected method. So, what is the difference between somebody who wants to participate via telematics but report quarterly? You're not even providing that option. It's almost that you're I guess, marginalizing people who have telematics on one side of things because they can't even use them unless they are going to be continuously connected. Maybe I'm missing something. Could you kind of elaborate on that a little bit, and why, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, why the only way to participate via telematics providers or OEM service providers would be to be continuously connected?
Thanks for the question, Matt. Let me kind of clarify a little bit of, if in the reg text we have two, I guess, different options of what we, for a continuously connected device. By continuously connected, we're just talking about, a device